It was the kind of night small towns like Cedar Hollow weren't supposed to have quiet streets. One diner still open, the hum of a flickering streetlight outside the post office. But in the early hours of October 3rd, 1998, something broke the silence. A scream, sharp, distant, and quickly swallowed by the rain. Officer Daniel Crow had just finished his midnight patrol when the call came in. Possible disturbance. Old River Road near the woods. He expected another false alarm, a drunk arguing with himself or teenagers, daring each other to trespass near the abandoned quarry. But when he arrived, the sight that met him burned into his mind forever. A car sat in the middle of the dirt road, engine still running, driver's door wide open. Rain pooled on the cracked windshield. Inside, the radio whispered static. And just beyond the beam of his headlights, a single woman's shoe lay in the mud. No footprints, no struggle marks. Just emptiness, as if she had vanished into thin air by morning. The missing woman's name was Claire Jennings, a 29-year-old nurse on her way home from a late shift. Her purse and ID were still in the car. The only strange detail, a small, hand-carved wooden figure was left on the dashboard. Shaped like a faceless man wearing a hat, the pattern emerges within months. 2 more disappearances haunted nearby counties. A teacher in Ohio, a waitress in Kentucky. Each vanished without trace, and each time, police found that same wooden figure. Reporters began calling him the Shadow Man. He left no fingerprints, no witnesses, no clear motive. But his victims shared something chilling. They were all last seen near highways. During heavy rainstorms, Detective Laura Briggs, a seasoned investigator from the FBI's behavioral unit, took notice when the cases crossed state lines. She was quiet, methodical, and had seen monsters before. But this one was different. He's not killing for pleasure, she told her team. He's creating fear. He wants the silence after the storm. For months, Laura pored over maps, crime scene photos, and coroner reports. Every detail pointed to one haunting conclusion. This wasn't random. The killer was following a route that matched long-haul trucking paths between state borders. The truck stop witnessed then. In 2001, a break, or what seemed like one. A trucker named Eddie Barnes came forward, shaking and pale. He claimed he'd seen a man fitting the killer's vague description, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark raincoat and an old baseball cap at a truck stop near Illinois. Eddie remembered the man's strange habit. He never ordered food, just sat in a corner booth, carving something into wood with a small pocket knife. Didn't say a word, Eddie told detectives, but he looked at everyone like he was choosing. That was the last night anyone saw Eddie alive. His body was found 3 days later, 20 miles away, eyes open, face frozen in terror, and beside him, another wooden figure. This one was different. It was carved to look like Eddie himself. The vanishing trail after that the Shadow Man disappeared for nearly a decade. No new victims. No wooden carvings. Locals thought he'd died, been caught for another crime, or simply stopped. But Detective Laura never believed it was over. Then in 2010, a farmer in Kansas discovered something while clearing an old barn his father once owned. A collection of 27 hand-carved figures, each marked with initials burned into the base. None of those initials matched the known victims. Who were they? Future targets. Or people no one ever found. The Echo of Fear by 2019. The story of the Shadow Man had turned into legend, told around campfires, true crime podcasts, and late-night talk shows. But then, in a quiet town in North Carolina, a young woman vanished during a thunderstorm. Same pattern, same silence, same carved figure on the dashboard, and written at the bottom for the first time. Were words burned into the wood I never stopped watching. Detective Laura, now gray-haired and weary, returned from retirement to lead the new task force. She stared at the evidence photo and whispered, "He's back." The rain hadn't touched Cedar Hollow in nearly a month. But on the night of April 22, 2019, thunder rolled like a promise. Storm clouds gathered above the small town, swallowing the stars one by one. In the distance, a single figure walked along the highway's shoulder, drenched, silent, and carrying a duffel bag that seemed too heavy for its size at precisely 2:13 a.m. The first call hit the local sheriff's office. There's a car on the road near mile marker 41. Doors open. No one inside. The deputy arrived 15 minutes later. Inside the car, he found a purse, a half-empty coffee cup, and a small wooden carving resting neatly on the dashboard, shaped like a woman kneeling. Her head bowed. The missing person was Hannah Reeve, a 26-year-old journalist known for chasing unsolved mysteries, including, ironically, the case of the Shadow Man. Laura's return detective, Laura Briggs, was sitting on her porch in rural Virginia when her phone rang. Her heart sank the moment she heard the name. "It's happening again," said the voice on the line. "North Carolina. Same figure. Same storm." Laura had retired a year earlier, leaving behind decades of cold cases and sleepless nights. But she still kept a box under her bed filled with newspaper clippings, evidence photos, and handwritten notes, each one marked with a single carved symbol, a man in a hat. She opened that box again, her fingers trembling slightly. After 21 years, the monster she'd spent her life chasing had come back, the pattern reborn when Laura arrived in Cedar Hollow. The investigation was already underway. The crime scene was eerily clean. No blood, no struggle, no tracks. Just the rain washing away the story. Local police dismissed the possibility of a serial link. It's been too long, they argued. Could be a copycat. But Laura knew better. The carving style, the deep cuts around the eyes, the grain smoothed with oil, it was identical to the ones from 1998. And the initials burned at the base. Told her this wasn't imitation. This was personal. She stared at the evidence board in the dim-lit station. Old photos of the 1990s victims pinned beside Hannah's smiling face. Every case tied together by one unseen thread rein. "He kills when the sky cries," Laura muttered. "And he always leaves before the sun rises." The motel tapes 2 days later. A lead surfaced from a highway motel 3 miles from Hannah's last known location. The owner, a gruff old man with shaky hands, brought Laura a security tape from the night of the storm. The footage was grainy, black and white. At 1:02 a.m., Hannah appeared, pulling into the motel parking lot, stepping out to talk to someone just off frame. Then, suddenly, a tall figure emerged from the darkness, umbrella in hand. He leaned close to her, almost whispering. She froze. Then, as if in a trance, she followed him toward the woods. The man never looked at the camera. But in one frame, lightning flashed, and for a split second, its reflection appeared in the glass door behind them. A pale face, hollow eyes, and a faint smile. Laura replayed that frame again and again. The image was blurred, but something in her gut twisted. It was him. The letter the next morning. A package arrived at the sheriff's office. No return address. Just the word "remember" scrawled across the envelope. Inside was a wooden carving, smaller than usual. This time, it depicted a woman sitting at a desk surrounded by papers. The base read LB. Detective Laura Briggs froze. Her team rushed to analyze it, but there were no prints, no DNA, no fiber traces. It was handcrafted, varnished like all the others. But inside the carving's hollow base, they found something new. A folded piece of newspaper from 1999, featuring a photo of Laura standing beside an FBI press conference banner. He wasn't just watching her. He'd kept her image for over 2 decades. The voice in the storm that night. Unable to sleep, Laura drove alone to the last known site, the rain-soaked highway where Hannah disappeared. Her headlights cut through the fog and the forest loomed ahead, dark and alive. Then, through the static of her car's radio, a faint signal came through a station that shouldn't exist. A man's voice, calm and haunting. "You never stopped looking for me, Laura, but I never stopped watching you." Her blood ran cold. She checked the signal, no frequency number, no trace. Just static, then silence. Moments later, flash of lightning illuminated the tree line, and for an instant, she saw him. A tall shadow standing still between the trees, holding an umbrella. head slightly tilted toward her car when she blinked. He was gone, the vanished tape the next day. The motel security tape disappeared from the evidence locker. The officer on night duty swore he never left his post. Cameras showed no one entering the room. But when they opened the drawer, the tape was gone, replaced by another small wooden figure. This one was different. It was carved in the shape of a camera lens cracked. One side burned, and on the back, scratched into the wood, were 3 chilling words. "Stop watching me." Laura closed her eyes. Realizing what this meant, he was inside the investigation now. Someone was helping him, or he was closer than they imagined. The Shadow Man had returned not to kill randomly, but to finish his story. And this time, Laura was part of it. Asterisk, the forest outside Cedar Hollow looked peaceful by daylight. Sunlight filtered through a canopy of leaves. Birds sang faintly, and the soft wind carried the scent of wet earth. Yet, for Detective Laura Briggs, the woods felt like a living thing watching. Breathing, waiting. It had been 3 days since the Shadow Man's return. The motel tape was gone, another carving had appeared, and Hannah Reeve was still missing. But Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the answer, or the killer himself, was buried somewhere in these trees. The locals called it Whispering Woods, according to old stories, when the wind passed through the hollow trunks. It made sounds like distant voices, whispers that never stopped. It was the last place Hannah's phone signal had pinged. The search begins. Laura stood beside the sheriff's SUV, her boots sinking into the damp soil. Her partner, Agent Ruiz, handed her a GPS tracker and flashlight. "We've got about 2 miles before the signal cuts off again," he said. "Stay close." They followed the path where tire marks faded into mud. Every few steps, the forest seemed to close in tighter, the sounds of civilization vanishing behind them. The rain began again, soft but steady, as if the storm itself was returning to witness the next act. Half a mile in, Laura stopped. A faint sound echoed through the trees, like wood scraping against metal. Ruiz raised his weapon, scanning the shadows. "Did you hear that?" Laura nodded. "He's here." Or, he was. The cabin. They found it an hour later, an old hunting cabin, half collapsed and covered in vines. The door creaked open under Laura's hand, releasing the smell of rotted timber and old smoke. Inside, dust motes floated through broken beams of light. But what caught her attention wasn't the decay. It was the table in the center of the room, a workbench. Carving tools, wood shavings scattered across the floor, and dozens of unfinished figures lined neatly in rows, faceless, silent, each one half complete. "Jesus," Ruiz whispered. "He made them here." Laura's eyes landed on something pinned to the wall, a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Detective Laura Briggs speaks at memorial for the victims of the Shadow Man." Her own photograph was beneath it, smiling, but the eyes had been cut out with a knife. The recording in the corner of the cabin sat a small cassette player covered in dust. Ruiz pressed play, and static filled the room. Then came the sound of rain, followed by a voice, calm, male, familiar. "You still think this is about them, don't you, Laura? About justice. About closure. But it's always been about you. I wanted to see how long it would take before you came back to the woods." Laura froze. It wasn't just a message. It was personal. Ruiz's hand tightened on his gun. "He recorded this for you." The tape continued. "I told you I never stopped watching. And now I'll prove it." Then silence, until the faint sound of a second voice whispered something behind him. A woman's voice. Hannah's Laura. "Please help." The tape clicked off. The trap panic flared through Laura's chest. She grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Briggs. We found a recording victim, might still be alive. Sending coordinates now." But the radio hissed with static. No signal. Ruiz checked his device, dead. Both trackers blinked red dot, and then faintly from outside the cabin came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the building, dot. Laura motioned for Ruiz to kill the light. The two stood in silence, guns drawn, listening. The rain masked the sound. But the faint crunch of leaves kept returning, moving from window to window, then a knock on the door. 3 times. Slow, followed by a whisper. Still watching? Laura kicked open the back door, flashlight blazing, but there was no one. Only darkness and rain. The discovery they followed the muddy tracks deeper into the forest until they reached a small clearing. There, beneath a tree, stood a wooden cross. Carved into it were initials, HR beneath it. A shallow mound of dirt. Freshly turned, Laura dropped to her knees, heart pounding. But when Ruiz began to dig, he froze. It wasn't a body, it was a box dot inside. Wrapped in plastic were photos. Dozens of them. Each one showed Laura from different years of her career. Walking to her car, talking to reporters. Visiting old crime scenes. He had followed her for over 2 decades. And at the bottom of the box lay one final photo taken just 3 days ago. It showed Laura sleeping in her home, the vanishing before she could speak. Ruiz's flashlight flickered, then went dark. "Battery's out," he said quietly. The forest seemed to close in again, every sound swallowed by the storm dot. Then, through the rain came a faint glow, a lantern light moving between the trees. A tall figure walked slowly toward them, coat-soaked umbrella in hand. Laura raised her gun. "FBI, don't move." The man stopped. Lightning flashed. For a moment, she saw his face pale. Expressionless, eyes hollow as a grave. Then, just as quickly, he vanished into the mist. They chased the light, shouting, tripping through mud and branches. But when they reached the road, he was gone. Only one thing remained on the asphalt. A new carving. It was Laura again. Carved perfectly from wood, her mouth covered by a hand. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It came in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, as if the sky itself refused to rest until he did. Detective Laura Briggs hadn't slept since that night in the woods. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that carved figure, her own likeness, mouth covered, eyes hollow. It wasn't just a message. It was a promise. Somewhere out there, the Shadow Man was watching again. And this time, he was closer than ever. The silent call at 4:07 a.m., Laura's phone rang. No number, no voice, only the sound of rain playing softly through the speaker. Then a faint whisper, a woman's voice. "He's here." Laura sat upright. "Hannah. Hannah, can you hear me?" But before she could get another word out, the line went dead. She replayed the recording 3 times. Each time, the whisper sounded the same. Fear, pain, desperation. It had to be Hannah Reeve, the missing journalist who vanished weeks ago. But the time stamp on the phone call location was impossible. It came from Laura's own home address. The intruder, by the time her team arrived, the storm had grown into a torrent. Ruiz kicked open the front door, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The living room looked untouched until they saw the mirror. Someone had written on the glass with rainwater streaks, "You shouldn't have come back." On the table lay a new wooden carving, smaller than the rest. This one was of a phone carved from oak, the earpiece cracked open. Inside the hollow was a fragment of paper with coordinates written in black ink. When Laura read them, her stomach turned. They pointed to Harlan Quarry, the same site where the first victim, Claire Jennings, had vanished 21 years ago. The return to Harlan Quarry by dawn. The storm had eased into a misty drizzle. The team drove out to the quarry, the place where it had all begun. The road was slick and silent, lined with empty trees that seemed to lean inward like silent witnesses. Ruiz parked near the rusted gate. "You think he's bringing us full circle?" Laura nodded. "He's not just repeating history. He's rewriting it." The quarry stretched before them like a scar, vast, deep, and cold. The echoes of dripping water filled the air, and in the center, near the edge of the cliff, stood something new. A wooden chair. Tied to it was a woman, the missing journalist, Hannah. Laura ran forward, cutting through the ropes. Hannah's eyes were open, trembling with exhaustion, her lips blue from the cold. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "He said he'd show you the truth." "What truth?" Laura asked. Hannah's gaze shifted behind Laura toward the edge of the quarry. Laura turned. There, just beyond the mist, stood the shadow man, umbrella in hand, still watching. FBI? Don't move. Ruiz shouted, raising his weapon. The figure didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head, the same motion every witness described decades ago. Then he dropped something to the ground and stepped backward. Vanishing into the fog dot when Laura reached the spot, he was gone. No footprints, no sign of movement. Only the object he had left behind. A small cassette tape with one word written on the label, confession. It's the tape back at headquarters. The tape played through a secure recorder. The sound was faint, warped by water, but the voice was clear. The same cold tone from before. You've been chasing ghosts, Laura. But tell me, did you ever ask why they started dying? Why the rain always followed? You never wondered why you were spared. Laura froze. Her throat tightened. The voice continued. The first carving. The very first one. Wasn't hers. It was yours. She slammed the stop button. The room went silent except for the low hum of the rain outside. Ruiz frowned. What does that mean? Laura opened her old case file, the 1998 report on Claire Jennings, the first victim. There, in the crime scene photos, she saw it. The carving on the dashboard wasn't of Claire. It was a woman standing beside a car, hand on her gun. It was her, the forgotten connection. Laura's hands shook. She dug through her old field notes, looking for anything she might have missed, something buried under decades of reports. Then she found it, an old witness statement from a trucker named Frank Dalton. It's taken 2 days after the first murder. He had described seeing a woman arguing with a man near the same road that night. When asked to identify the woman, he said she looked like that detective on the news. Laura dropped the paper, realization dawning like a cruel sunrise. She had been there years before she officially joined the case. She'd been responding to a separate accident called the same night Claire disappeared. Asterisk, and in her dashcam footage from that night footage, she'd long forgotten. There was a shadow moving in the rain. Standing behind her car as she investigated the crash, the shadow man wasn't just hunting her now. He had chosen her from the very beginning. The storm returned, thunder cracked again outside, shaking the glass windows. The lights flickered and the station's power went out. In the darkness, Laura heard a faint dripping sound like water falling steadily onto tile. She turned on her flashlight. The hallway was flooded with rainwater seeping under the door. Someone had opened the emergency exit. She stepped forward, heart pounding, light trembling in her hand. On the floor, floating in the water, was another wooden carving, our own badge, and written on the back, etched in the same jagged hand. Welcome back to where it ends. The storm reached its breaking point. Thunder rolled through the valley like cannon fire, and sheets of rain crashed against the windows of the Cedar Hollow police station. Inside, every flicker of lightning threw the world into chaos, brief flashes of white followed by suffocating darkness. Detective Laura Briggs stood in the hallway, her boots submerged in an inch of water. The carving of her badge floated beside her, spinning slowly in the current. The words scratched on the back, "Welcome back to where it ends," echoed in her mind like a curse. She whispered to herself, "It's not hunting me anymore. He's leading me." It's the old case reopened by dawn. The storm had quieted, leaving the town blanketed in fog. Laura gathered the remaining evidence from 2 decades of unsolved horror photos, maps, carvings, recordings. She spread them across the table, each piece a chapter in a story she had never truly understood. Ruiz entered, still drenched from the night's chaos. The forensics came back on the tape from the quarry, he said. Traces of soil mixed with varnish. Same type used in woodworking from the 1980s. Local supplier in Laura cut him off. Greystone. He frowned. How do you? Because that's where he started, she said quietly. The carvings, the rain patterns, even the root of the disappearances. They all lead back to Greystone County. And that's where I grew up. Ruiz hesitated. You think he knew you before all this? She looked at him, her expression hollow. I think he watched me before I even became a cop. The journey to Greystone, they drove through the endless fog, headlights slicing through pale curtains of mist. The GPS signal flickered, the radio fading in and out until it landed on a single repeating frequency, the faint hum of static, broken by rain sounds. It was the same frequency from Laura's home. The deeper they drove into Greystone, the quieter the world became. Houses sat abandoned, roofs caved in, trees clawing at the sky. It was as though the town itself had drowned years ago and no one had noticed. Then, as the fog thinned, the outline of a two-story farmhouse appeared, old wooden, leaning to one side. Laura's breath caught. She knew that house. It was her childhood home. The house of rain, the front door creaked open before she touched it. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of wet timber and decay. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, a slow, rhythmic beat that filled the silence. The furniture was covered in white sheets, all soaked through. Photographs lined the walls, their faces warped by moisture. But one detail chilled her. Every frame contained her, not her family, not her friends, just her. At different ages, at the center of the living room stood a table. And on that table rested a wooden figure, larger than any before. It was Laura again, but this time she wasn't alone. A tall, faceless man stood behind her. One hand on her shoulder, Ruiz whispered, "He's been inside here." "Recently?" Laura shook her head. "No, he's always been here." The hidden room, they searched the house room by room until they reached the basement door. The handle was rusted, but when Laura pulled it, the hinges screamed open. A faint orange light flickered below. The basement was lined with wooden shelves filled with jars of varnish, old tools, and half-finished carvings. In the far corner sat a single chair facing a wall, and beside it, an old reel-to-reel tape recorder still spinning slowly. Laura pressed play. The tape crackled. Then a familiar voice filled the room. Her own. "This is Detective Briggs, Greystone County Sheriff's Department." Recording statement. She stopped it immediately. "That's my voice." From 25 years ago. Ruiz stared at her. "You made recordings." She shook her head. "Never. Not here." She pressed play again. The tape continued, her voice trembling now. "He said he'd keep me safe. But he lied. The rain won't stop. He's making them disappear to protect me. I can't." The tape cut off abruptly. Then the same male voice that haunted her dreams spoke. "You were always part of the storm, Laura. You just forgot." The revelation. Laura stumbled back, breathing fast. Memories she had buried began to surface. A figure standing over her bed when she was a child, whispering stories about the shadows that walk when it rains. Her mother's sudden death, her father's disappearance the following year, it all connected. Ruiz found an old box in the corner and pried it open. Inside were newspaper clippings, all from the 1980s, all describing missing women in Greystone County. Each article had notes scrawled in the margins for her. "She's safe now. She must forget." At the bottom of the box lay a single photograph, a man holding a small child in his arms. The child was Laura. The man's face was blurred by age, but the umbrella in his hand. It was unmistakable. Ruiz whispered, "That's him." Laura's knees gave way. "No," she said weakly. "That's my father." The storm reborn lightning struck outside, shaking the ground. The lights flickered again, and the reel-to-reel tape began spinning on its own. The voice returned, no longer a whisper, but calm, deliberate, almost tender. "You see now, Laura? I never hunted you. I saved you. I cleaned the world for you so you could grow. You just forgot who you were meant to become." A shadow moved across the wall, tall, wide-shouldered, unmistakable. Laura turned, gun drawn, flashlight trembling. "Where are you?" she demanded. The shadow tilted its head. "Home." The light bulb burst, plunging the basement into darkness. And in that instant, Laura realized the truth. The shadow man wasn't just her father's ghost. He was the part of her memory she had locked away, waiting to wake again in the rain. The house groaned under the weight of the storm. Wind slammed against the windows like an angry heartbeat, and the lights flickered, stuttering between life and death. Water dripped through cracks in the ceiling, tapping a slow, uneven rhythm that echoed through the hallways. Detective Laura Briggs stood frozen in the basement, her flashlight beam trembling across the shelves of carvings. Each one now looked different. Not random faces anymore, but people she knew. Her former partners, her classmates, her victims from the old case files. And at the center of it all, the largest carving yet, her father. The return of the voice, the reel-to-reel tape, clicked back to life on its own. Static hissed. Then that deep, haunting voice filled the basement once more. "You've come full circle, Laura. You chased me for years, but you were only chasing the echo of what you left behind." Her flashlight flickered. A silhouette moved along the far wall, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hat. He stepped into view just long enough for her to see the glint of something metallic in his hand. The pocket knife, her father's old knife. Ruiz lifted his gun, shouting, "FBI, don't move." But before he could fire, the figure dissolved into darkness. The light bulb above them bursting in a spray of glass dot. The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. They were trapped. The diary. While Ruiz tried to force the door open, Laura noticed a wooden box resting under the table. Inside it lay a diary, pages wrinkled and soaked from years of damp air. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but unmistakably familiar. Her father's. She flipped through, reading aloud. "The voices come with the rain. They tell me to watch her, to protect her from what hides in the dark. I see the faces of the women. They scream in my dreams. I carve them so they can't hurt her anymore." The next page read, "She saw one. The nurse. Claire Jennings. She found us. I had to stop her. Laura can never know." Laura's throat tightened. "He killed them. All of them. Because of me." Ruiz stared at her. "He thought he was saving you. That's why he left the carvings memorials, not trophies." But the diary wasn't finished. On the final page, dated the night her father disappeared. The writing changed, jagged, frantic. "The rain won't stop. She's hearing them now. I see the shadows in her eyes. I think she's becoming me." The splitting truth lightning flashed through the narrow basement window. For a second, Laura saw her reflection in the cracked glass, her own face pale and drenched, eyes hollow. But something was wrong. Her reflection wasn't copying her movements, it was smiling. And when she blinked, the reflection mouthed the words, "I never left." Her knees went weak. The world tilted. Sounds distorted. The rain outside merged with whispers, hundreds of them, circling her mind. The carvings on the shelves seemed to twitch in the darkness, their wooden eyes turning toward her. Ruiz caught her arm. "Laura, look at me." She gasped, her voice shaking. "He's not out there. He's in here." She pointed to her head. "He never died. He's a part of me." The memory returns to the storm outside roared louder, as if the heavens themselves were tearing open. Laura's mind unraveled in flashes of memory, her father's hands covered in mud. The wooden figures lined neatly on the kitchen table. The sound of rain tapping against the windows while he whispered bedtime stories about the shadows that protect him. Then came the memory she'd buried deepest of all. A woman's scream. A car engine running. Her father dragging a lifeless body into the woods, and a little girl standing in the rain, watching. She had seen the first murder. She had forgotten it to survive. The last recording. Ruiz finally broke the basement door open, and they stumbled upstairs. The entire house trembled as wind howled through shattered windows. In the center of the living room now sat a new carving, freshly varnished, still dripping. It was Laura kneeling beside a grave. Next to it lay an old tape recorder already playing. "You understand now, don't you?" The voice said softly. "You were the first witness, the first believer. The rain followed you because the rain remembers. You can stop it, Laura. You just have to finish what I started." Her eyes filled with tears. "No, I won't." The voice grew quieter, almost kind. "Then you'll never wake from the storm." The decision. She stepped outside into the pouring rain. The wind lashed her hair across her face, thunder splitting the sky above. Ruiz shouted behind her, but she didn't listen. She walked toward the old oak tree near the edge of the field, the same spot where her father had been buried without ceremony after his mysterious disappearance. The grave was still there, marked only by a weathered stone. She dropped to her knees. "If you're still here," she said, "then take me instead. End this." Lightning struck the ground nearby, illuminating a figure standing just beyond the tree line. He raised his hand slowly, pointing the pocket knife toward her heart. Then he whispered through the rain, "You already did." The storm breaks the world went white. When Ruiz reached her, she was lying beside the grave, unconscious but alive. The rain had finally stopped. The carvings in the basement had vanished, every shelf empty as though they'd never existed. He shook her awake. "Laura, talk to me." She opened her eyes, dazed, whispering, "It's over." But as he helped her to her feet, she noticed something on her wrist, a streak of fresh varnish, the same kind used on every wooden figure. And when she looked up at the farmhouse window, her reflection stared back, smiling faintly. Eyes cold. The sun had not truly risen over Greystone in years. But that morning, for a brief moment, light broke through the clouds. Dew clung to the dead grass outside the farmhouse, and steam rose from the soaked earth. Detective Laura Briggs sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes unfocused. Around her, uniformed officers moved silently, gathering evidence, photographing the scene, whispering about what they'd found in the basement. But Laura wasn't listening. She could still hear it, the faint patter of rain that wasn't really there, a sound that lived inside her now. Ruiz crouched beside her, voice gentle. "The storm's over. Whatever that thing was, it's gone." It's gone. She didn't answer, because deep down, she knew he was wrong. The storm never truly ended. It just changed form. The missing evidence by afternoon, the farmhouse was cordoned off. Dozens of carvings had been recovered from the basement, faces of victims long thought lost preserved in perfect detail. But there was one carving the evidence team couldn't find. The one of her. Ruiz reviewed the logs twice. Every carving bagged and tagged, except hers. "It's like it vanished," Laura said quietly. "No, it didn't vanish. It's waiting." When he looked at her, her eyes seemed darker, not haunted, but hollow. Waiting for what? She didn't reply. She only stared out toward the tree line, where a single umbrella stood propped against the fence, one that no officer had claimed. The whisper returns that night. The rain came back, soft at first, then heavier, like a memory sinking back into the earth. Laura lay awake in her motel room, staring at the ceiling. She could hear the water trickling down the window, matching the rhythm she'd known her whole life. Steady, patient, watching. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. One new voicemail. She pressed play. Static filled the speaker. Then a whisper. A woman's voice this time. "He's still watching you?" Her heart raced. "Hannah." But the next voice wasn't Hannah's. It was her own. "Don't fight it, Laura. We're the same now." She dropped the phone. The voicemail ended, replaced by silence except for the faint creak of footsteps outside her door. When she opened it, the hallway was empty. Except for a single wooden carving on the floor, it was Ruiz, carved perfectly, eyes closed, mouth sewn shut. The vanishing partner the next morning, Ruiz, was gone. His hotel room was untouched. No signs of struggle, no luggage missing. Just his badge lying on the bed beside a wet umbrella. The security footage from the hallway showed only one thing: Laura, standing outside his room at 2:11 a.m., holding something small in her hand. She appeared calm, focused. The officers reviewing the footage assumed it was an old-time stomp. Error? Maybe a glitch in the recording. But Laura never remembered leaving her bed. At least, not the part of her that was still herself. The return to Cedar Hollow 3 weeks later. Laura returned to Cedar Hollow, under official orders to close the file and sign off on the unsolved classification of the Shadow Man case. She was thinner, quieter, her movements more deliberate. In her report, she wrote, "Case terminated. Subject presumed deceased. Final evidence secured." But when the clerk filed the documents, he noticed something strange. The last page of the report wasn't typed. It was handwritten, in ink still wet enough to smudge. The words read, "He never died. He just needed a new voice." The mirror that evening, as rain began to fall again, Laura stood in front of her motel mirror. Her reflection stared back, tired, broken, but steady. Then the light flickered, and for a split second she saw him standing behind her in the glass. Her father, the shadow man. He whispered softly, "You see, I never left you. I became you." Her hand trembled as she reached out and touched the mirror. For a moment, it felt warm. The glass rippled like water, and when she pulled her hand back, her reflection stayed smiling. "Stop," she whispered. "Stop it." But her reflection only tilted its head just as he once did, and said, "We were always the same rain, Laura. You just didn't want to feel it." The final revelation the next morning. The motel manager found her room empty. The bed untouched. The window wide open, rainwater flooding the carpet. On the bathroom mirror, written in condensation, were the words, "I remember everything now." A wooden carving sat on the sink, her own face, this time smiling peacefully. The official report listed her as missing. Some believed she fled the country. Others said she finally broke under the weight of her obsession. But a week later, a highway patrolman driving through Greystone spotted a lone figure walking down the empty road in the pouring rain. A woman in a dark coat, carrying an umbrella. When he stopped to offer help, she turned toward him, and he saw her face clearly under the lightning. It was Laura. She smiled, raised a small wooden figure, his likeness, and whispered, "The storm never ends." Then she vanished into the rain. Epilogue months later. New disappearances began across state lines. Small towns, same pattern, same silence. The media called it the Shadow's second reign, but investigators found one new detail the old killer never left behind. Each carved figure now carried two sets of initials, one burned deep into the base, LB, and underneath it carved faintly in the grain. And the rain remembers.